the coronavirus has had a staggering impact on this country. Over 5 million cases here in the United States, and over 160,000 deaths have been reported in this country. The global pandemic, though, has also revealed some deep-rooted inequalities in this country that communities of color have been suffering from for decades. But this virus has certainly shone a light on that. So we want to talk about that. The National Urban League has released its latest report, the 2020 State of Black America Unmasked. The report works to expose the toll and economic devastation that the coronavirus has had on Black America. But not just that. So Marc Morial is the president and the CEO of the National Urban League and joins us now. The title is very telling, Unmasked, Marc, because so much of this report, and it's different from year to year, but with this report, I think that the overriding theme of the impact of the coronavirus is definitely very present. But I want to talk about sort of the basics of the report so people understand what you all are trying to determine is something that you call the equity index, right? I'm calling it up right now, the Equality Index, and it looks at different aspects of life: economics, health, education, social justice, civic engagement, to determine just where African Americans are now. What have you observed? How is this year's index different than last year's index?
So first of all, Anne-Marie, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you again. Let me explain the Equality Index. So the Equality Index presumes that if the status of white Americans is 100%, let's say in economics, in health, in education, looking at factors such as home ownership, median income, lifespans, for example, then the status of Black Americans is 73.8%, and this is pre-COVID. The status of Latinos, Latinx, is approximately 78%. What's remarkable is that that number, 73%, has changed very little in the last 15 years. A point or two here, a point or two there, some movement up, some movement down within categories. Now, the report also points out that since COVID, COVID has hit the nation like an earthquake. It's hit Black America like a triple earthquake. A triple earthquake. One, an earthquake when it comes to health. Twice as likely to die, 3 times as likely to be seriously infected with COVID. When it comes to economics, we have Black unemployment rates, and I should say the overall unemployment rate, reaching into the eons of Great Depression levels, nearing 20%. And certainly over the last month or two, it's gone down, but you've got to take into effect that there are also many people who may not have looked for work because they were laid off pre-COVID, or many people who were on PPP because of the PPP program were able to keep their jobs. And the third is the exposure of these deep, deep, deep wounds that the criminal justice and the police systems in America have carried out on Black Americans. And the George Floyd incident is exhibit A in that area. So things since that index was put together, I would say, have worsened for Black Americans. They've certainly worsened for the nation at large. And this is a time when America is receiving a wake-up call, number one, and we're at a time of a crossroads where this report says these challenges have to be seriously addressed, not with rhetoric, but with action.
There's one line in sort of the opening statement of the report that really stands out, and it stands out physically. America caught the coronavirus and Black America caught hell. And you talk about sort of the 19 lessons learned from COVID-19, but one of them being, the overriding one being that before this pandemic, there was already a pandemic of racism here in this country. And you really eloquently sort of illustrated how that pandemic has made this pandemic so much worse for African Americans. Talk about some of the other lessons learned.
So another important lesson learned is that bias in the healthcare system is explicit and implicit. Leadership matters. We see governors We see mayors struggling to respond responsibly, following science, taking the dramatic steps they need. And then we've seen fumbling and stumbling and bumbling all too often at the national level. One thing I want to really emphasize with respect to this report is people say, well, what should we do? So in the short run, we need to make sure we mask up to protect ourselves, notwithstanding any recommendations, wear a mask. Number two, we need to vote. We need to vote with a vengeance. We need to vote with ferocity. We need to do everything to protect our vote. It's offensive that the post office and the vote by mail system, which has existed for generations, is being unfairly and I think irresponsibly attacked. And then we've got to make sure that the census, which is being cut off early by the Trump administration, we've got to make sure we are counted. And we're looking at ways that we can challenge the decision of the Trump administration to end the census prematurely in a way that will rob the American people of an accurate count, cheat the American people out of really, truly knowing how many people live within the borders of the United States, because it's important for political reapportionment as well as the distribution of federal funds. So there's some concrete short-term action steps. In the long run, we need a comprehensive plan, not just traditional public policy, but a comprehensive plan to address these triple pandemics, these triple threats that this 2020 has forced all of us to take a new look at.
When I was thinking about the impact of COVID-19 and looking at the report, what I kept on wondering was, how long will it take for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans to emerge from the fallout of COVID-19? Because particularly Black Americans are contracting the disease at a higher rate, and we're hearing more and more about, symptoms and side effects that linger long after people get out from under the disease, additional health burdens that they're going to have to deal with, but also dying. And, we're talking about people who are working in the front lines. They may be the main breadwinners in families, and I know that I'm getting extremely broad here, but when we think about the conversation about the widening wealth gap in this country, and when we talk about that, we are talking about Black people making less money, earning less, saving less than white people, and that gap is getting wider. Then you add on dying, literally, the income of some people, it's gone forever from that family. I just think, how long is it going to take us to recover? Is that a concern of yours?
It's a concern, but I think it's a call to action for this generation. Generations of Americans in the 20th century won World War II and ushered in a great expansion in the 1950s. Americans in the 1960s, led by civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King and John Lewis and Whitney Young, tackled the pandemic of segregation and crushed it to the earth, gave voting rights to Black people, and ushered in a period where poverty actually was reduced in America, in both Black America and also amongst white Americans and Latino Americans. This is a call to action for this generation. No more business as usual, no more politics as usual, no more white privilege or white supremacy, but an America that works for all Americans, an America that works for all people. And it's going to take dramatic action in the future, or these problems, like a cancer, will grow and persist and damage the body politic of this nation for decades and decades to come. So I see it as a call to action when leaders must lead, and everyone has to do a self-examination and a bit of a recommitment to what this will require. The wake up around structural racism and its corrosive nature, and the fact that we've had at the public square rhetoric that enables and foments hate, an increase in hate crimes in a nation. Here we are in 2020, some almost 60 years after the great historic gains of the 1960s. And America seems, when it comes to race relations, to be going in reverse. Well, we as a generation have to say no, no, and hell no. We're not going to allow America to go in reverse, and we're going to take the dramatic steps necessary, and we're going to push back against those in this country who seem to believe that somehow yesterday, an America of yesterday was somehow some glorious era. No, we have to build the America of the 21st century, which is an America that practices what it preaches, where the words on paper mean something for all people, for which there is certainly justice and economic opportunity, jobs with good wages, quality schools for all, a healthcare system that recognizes that healthcare is a right, not a privilege to be conferred because of your economic status, and which says that the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap, that income inequality are not tolerable in the wealthiest nation in the history of humankind.
I like how that sounds. We are talking about the 2020 State of Black America. You guys got a great document online. Head to the National Urban League's website. It's easy reading. I know it sounds heavy, but they got lots of. Sorry, say that again.
Graphics and photos. I said NUR.org.
Yeah, lots of graphics.
The team does a great job making it look appealing.
Completely. It's easier than you think, and it's really, really important. And you can see all the reports from previous years as well to really give you some context about what's happening in this country. Marc Morial, thank you.
Always good to be with you, Anne Marie. Thank you so much.